So you started out, Kara, at the very beginning saying that the platforms are not your friends,
No.
And they're in it for themselves. And you said platforms, which was agnostic. I assume you were talking about Facebook, Twitter,
yes.
Google+, LinkedIn, well, Google+, never mind.
Yeah.
LinkedIn, Instagram, et cetera. Could you expound on that? Because this is an audience largely of media companies here.
I think one of the things that people in publishing think, I don't know if they didn't get hugged as much as children or something, but they think that everybody has their best interest at heart, that these companies care. I don't think they're necessarily malevolent. I just think they do not care. They do not. They don't differentiate between maps, between a great New York Times article. They do a little bit, but I think it's just all data to them. And so they don't. They're using it to improve their platforms, and it helps keep people on the Facebook platform. You know, another squirrel or cat video or whatever. They're great videos. Trust me. I mean, I click on them all the time and just stare at them. There was, you know, the old dancing lady at the White House was fantastic. And it made you feel good in this really ugly political time, especially. It was elegant. You know, but they don't care what it is. And so I think one of the things that's going to be hard is that they're literally making you paint their fence, essentially. And so there haven't been clear economic benefits as yet. They're all saying, look at all your reach, look at all your traffic, and you're like, and yet I have no money from it. And yet I have, and they're saying, oh, it'll come. And you're like, probably, but why don't we start, you know what I mean? So it's a question, but you don't have any control of it. You have no power and no leverage. With you know, they'll just replace you with the next one. And so there's nothing you have that's special that they can't replace it. And that's the problem, is that there's no leverage there's no leverage of it. It's not like a cable situation where HBO is just better. They have to have it. You have to have ESPN. There's no have to have among any media. There just isn't. It just isn't.
So can you talk about that in the context of instant articles? And of course, Google's got AMP, which Twitter has signed up for.
Google's trying to do the anti-Facebook, because they're like, look, we want to help you because it helps us get advertising. So we want to give you more money. And Google probably is the place where you could make more money with it, because it's in their interest to generate. They're under siege by Facebook and others. And so they've got to be more friendly to I don't think Google's friendly to publishers. Trust me. I used to get mad. Larry Page got mad at me because remember when there was the Mayan calendar? I said we're 10 minutes away from Google becoming self-aware and start killing the human race. So like all of a sudden all the computers will be like bomb. So it's like the Terminator movie come to life. And so I just think that they're more interested in getting your content out there, but not because it's good. They have no interest in content. They just don't. They don't even know what it is. And they don't, you know, you could see by Facebook on some level, Cheryl's really articulate and talks a lot about this and is super smooth. Mark is the same way, but all it is stuff that they can pack their platform with. And again, if something else works, they'll replace it if it doesn't. And I think we spent a lot of time saying, oh, I got 1 million views on, you know, we got Elizabeth Warren. We did an interview with Elizabeth Warren, and for some reason, it attracted 2 million views on Facebook. I didn't make a dime from that. And they're like, you got 2 million views. I'm like, great. People like me. Like, it was like, so what? Like, I don't know where the benefit was.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It was really hard to discern the benefit. And that's what worries me, is that we don't understand this technology. Most media people don't understand technology. They just don't. And they keep it in a black box, and so we don't have control of the technology in a way. And all the best technologists are over there. They're not working for us, sorry to say.
Yeah.
They just aren't.
Excellent. Well, a little foreshadowing. Stay tuned. In about 45 minutes, I'm going to stand up here, and I have some ideas about how you actually can make some money. So,
right, okay,
but I love the topic because monetization is clearly. I mean, if you're not making any money as a business, that's not sustainable.
Yeah, no, you have ad blockers next, and it just goes on. They keep inventing stuff to screw us. Like really, I mean, seriously, you're like, At the same time, they're investing a lot of money in Hollywood content that they can sell. The Game of Thrones is that's the HBO model. Amazon's doing it to sell more devices. They're always doing it for something else, which was the case in original television. RCA made shows because they had televisions to sell. So, that's interesting. The stuff they're doing around entertainment is interesting. And if I was in Hollywood, I'd be plenty worried because now creators have all kinds of. It's a great time to be a content creator in Hollywood because you have lots of outlets. So that's a good thing. But I'm talking about regular media. It's a little harder.
And I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'm going to ask if we can get the microphones ready so that we can get the audience involved here. So you made a distinction that I thought was interesting between data-driven versus data-informed, if I remember your terminology correctly. Could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. So data-driven is you make your content because of what people click on. And therefore, there's no editorial input in there. Like, I worked at the Washington Post. I was lucky to work under Ben Bradley when I started my career. He was at the end of his career, but you know, he's a legend, and he really was. And he'd walk in and go, ah, wah, like, ah. It's like the movie. You're like, he was like that. Great job, kid. Like that, he'd do that, and you'd be like, great job, kid. And he just had a real instinct for content, really, like what worked and what didn't work in storytelling. And in this case, there's no instinct involved. And by the way, computers are usually right in what people want. It just tends to it doesn't create that serendipity and beauty that sometimes content is known for. And I had an interesting dinner in Silicon Valley. Richard Plepler, who's head of HBO, who I think is, if you've ever heard him speak, we've had him at Code, so you can see his interviews. But he asked me to have a dinner in Silicon Valley to meet I want to meet some tech people. I'm like, all right, okay. They always do this. These media guys come in and they're like, I want to meet some tech people. All right, okay. We have a dinner at this place called The Battery, which is this sort of Soho House fake version in San Francisco. And Instagram had Kevin Systrom, all kinds of people, and Susan Wojcicki, who's head of YouTube, Google was started in her garage. I mean, she's wonderful. She's a wonderful person. She runs YouTube right now. And so she sits down next to him, and she's a fantastic executive, very self-effacing, unusually not an egomaniac for that group. And she kind of looks like a soccer mom. Like she's a surprising executive for that company. And so he starts saying, why didn't Google invest in content? Like, when's it going to invest in content? Google's probably going to stay out of this for a while. They're not like Amazon or the others. And so why didn't Google make shows or invest in content and do this? And she's like, well, you know, we're a platform. She kept trying to explain platform to him. We facilitate creators. We want to help give money to creators. We're trying to do this. And he goes, well, you should go with your gut. And she's like, she's pretty articulate. A lot of Google people aren't very articulate. So she's like, well, I can't really go with my gut because I work for a robot named Larry Page. And if the algorithm is always smarter than the gut, always, the algorithm's always right. And these people believe in the algorithm. And so I can't go with my gut. And so he's like, you can't go with your gut? I mean, with girls, I saw the Tiny Furniture movie, and I felt it right here. And he kept pointing to his crotch, which was like so awkward. And he's like, I felt it right here, my gut, my golden gut. And I paid her $30,000, we made girls, and ba-boom, like that. And so it was so funny. And she's like, well, you know, and she knew the numbers for girls. And she's like, well, it's just a couple 100,000. I love girls, by the way. I love Lena Dunham. And it's only a couple 100,000. Cutie Pie has 40 million. And he's like, Cutie Pie? What's Cutie Pie? And she's like, well, it has 40. He does YouTube videos, 40 million, and this one is 100. Never heard of any of them. And so it was like, I literally was like, shoo, like it was like such a, and she's relatively articulate for most internet people, so she's very articulate.
Collide.
It was sort of like, you know, his ear is not going to stay eventually. But there is a moment of that instinct is important.
Yeah.
It creates the girls and the Sopranos, and Google is not going to be creating The Sopranos anytime soon, like that kind of thing.
Right. So. Great. So let's turn it over to the audience. I know there must be questions out here. I see one right there. If we can get a microphone to her.
Hi. My question is actually related to this last question. You mentioned that journalists usually hate this data-driven way of approaching content. And my question for you is, in your team, how do you deal with that tension? And kind of how do you instruct your writers to create content?
You know, we're unusual. We're not data-driven. We're data-informed. I would call us data. We don't get driven by data. We decide what is important, you know what I mean, by using journalistic standards. We're sort of right in the middle, old school and new school kind of thing. We don't pretend it's not important. A lot of journalists do. Like they're willfully ignorant of what's happening. And we're also embracing of it compared to, I've always been embracing of new technologies, but that's not usual. Like I carried around a suitcase phone for years at the Washington Post. Everyone thought I was like, and I kept going, this is going to be small, it's going to be tiny, it's going to be in your pocket, you're going to have all kinds of information. They'd be like, you're so weird, like go away. And I was like, this is where the Washington Post is going to be on this. Like, and I'm a genius, but I of course didn't go work for any of these companies. But if that was the case, I'd be on my island right now, plotting murders and stuff, like pushing buttons, like sharks with things on their heads. That's the one thing about these billionaires. They're so bad at it. Like only Larry Ellison rises to the level of evil billionaire villain. You know what I mean? Like if I was that, I'd be like buttons, floors open, no repercussions. So anyway, they're like, I have my Tesla, and now I'm going to go have some kombucha. I'm like, ugh. Where's your supermodel girlfriend? And even there's some hope with Evan Spiegel, right? He has a supermodel girlfriend. Sorry. Anyway, yes. So my journalists that I hire do understand social media. They do like it. They embrace it. They love it. They use it. They're facile in it. They understand Instagram. They have. I don't hire people that don't have a love of it and don't have an interest in it. So that's not a tension with us in any way. That said, we don't go Apple hot. I did one story once that just said Apple, 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 Twitter, Twitter, Apple, 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 Google, and we got like 1 million hits on it. And I just was proving it. But we decide on a news basis what we think is important. That said, we're not ignorant of stuff that will just pop. And sometimes you don't even know what'll pop. And sometimes you do know what'll pop, but sometimes you don't. Like yesterday was a good example. We do very substantive stories on all this FBI Apple thing. We think it's a very important story. Very substantive stories. But Bill Gates did a thing where he seemed to back the FBI and then he walked it back that he didn't. But watching the video, you're like, what the fuck does this guy think? Like he didn't. And so we put a post saying, here's the video. What the fuck does this guy think? That was the post. It was like, watch it yourself. We're confused. And so in the old days, journalists wouldn't have done that. And it was definitely a traffic-inducing thing, but it was also, we don't get it. Do you? Like, we wanted to point out that the stuff that we talk about in Slack, you guys are using Slack, presumably you all are. The stuff we talk about in Slack could be content. Like, we stop with the sort of throat clearing that journalists tend to do a lot. And really, you can see other publications doing. The New York Times is very chatty now, if you know, in their stories. There's a chattier tone and a personality tone. I encourage personality from my journalists because I want them to be stars. That's not something most old-time you sort of sat there and typed quietly by yourself. And so I encourage them to be out there and saying things and having a point of view, as long as it's on a reported basis. It's not just empty pontificating, which too many media people do. But that's another issue. That's nothing to do with the internet.
Well, I'm tempted to have you just riff more on evil billionaires, but I think we should take some more questions from the audience here. Who we got? Somebody up there? Thank you.
Hi. You mentioned the importance of brands and branding, and I agree with you. And there's a quandary I've been trying to figure out. So now it seems that we're losing some brand awareness in media content because in the print legacy brands, you had a lot of third-party endorsement. On every train, every airplane, you could see the sharp-dressed man was reading The Economist. I must read The Economist too. Now the branding is for the device that they're reading on.
Yep.
Where do you think that's going to go? How do you think it'll get solved? And do you think it's a serious problem?
I do. I think it's just harder. It's just harder. It's easy to gripe. The old days were so easy. It's just harder. I think what I mean about branding is people have to be able to understand you very quickly. Like I think people get recode very well. I think we're doing a good job of that. It's like people naturally assume. Say if I put up yesterday. I put up a Gavin Newsom interview. He's running for governor of California. And literally before people watch it, they're like, oh, she's going to give it to him, which I did, which was the case. And it wasn't that. It was a great, really substantive interview. People expected a substantive interview from us before we started. People expect us to, when we break news, they're like, oh, it's Recode, they broke it. Of course they did. Everything is old news because Recode already broke it weeks before. And so we have that. And so we have also super intelligent and not kissing Silicon Valley's ass is another thing we're known for. And we live it and we breathe it and we are it. And I think that's how people can distinguish. I think if you're sort of in the muddy middle, you have a real problem. If you're not, it's sort of like I covered retail for 7 years for the Washington Post. And there was always the store that was the high end and then the low end, and then there was the muddy middle. They always closed, the ones that they couldn't really, people knew what Target was. People knew what Neiman Marcus was. And so I think if you're any kind of brand, you have to be very clear in your branding and stick very closely with it, and then slowly make outpost moves like we're doing with podcasts. So in podcasts, we do all these amazing interviews with the top people in tech and media and stuff, and we can't get them all on the analog stage. And so now we do 16 or 20 a year, or over our all events, maybe 30 or more. But now we can do, Peter Kafka does one, and I do one. We can now do 102 interviews. That's 102 chances to show them what we can do all the time. And I think you just have to pick what it is and not disappoint on that. So I agree. How people know about us, I'm not sure how they know. I think they know because they experience it, and once they experience it, they either like it or don't like it.
Great. So this next question,
Sure.
can you respond in one of 6 ways? Like, love, haha, wow, sad,
Oh,
or
dear,
angry?
that's too
No.
many.
Those are Facebook's new
Oh.
emoticons.
Oh, really?
So, yeah. I'm sorry. I have Ryan right
I
here.
hate emojis.
So I have kind of a question about the monetizing thing and where journalism is going. ESPN had a brand, Grantland, and
Mhm.
Grantland was shut down over the summer.
Yes.
And almost everybody I knew read it. Like I'd see it all
Yeah, it's a
over the
great
place.
site.
It was an amazing thing. They had a lot of long-form journalism, but I guess ESPN couldn't figure out how to monetize it and who their target audience was. Do you anticipate that there are going to be splintering of sort of large brands as they try things out, as you said, like sort of throw something at the wall, it doesn't stick for them, but then like Simmons has started The Ringer now.
Yeah.
He had the money, he had the capital, or he has investors.
Yeah.
People are speculating on that. Like,
I think Grantland was an unusual. There's a lot of Bill Simmons issues in there,
Oh, tons,
and ESPN issues. So
Right,
it
right.
wasn't just they couldn't make money for it.
Right.
He's a super entrepreneur, and he just didn't. He wanted their money, but didn't want to listen to them. So it's hard. You know what I mean? Like I felt the same thing was I was at News Corp. If I had to see one more corporate weasel that told me about the internet, I'd be like, I've forgotten more about the internet yesterday than you know in your entire. You know what I mean? Like I didn't like being in that environment because they really were just incompetent. I don't know how else to put it. And so I think that was a little more complicated. I think he was, like Nate Silver is another good example. Was he benefiting from the New York Times? Was he not benefiting? You know what I mean? Like, or is it the content just not good enough? It's a question. I think there's going to be a lot of experimentation in the area and then trying to figure out what makes money. There's some people that think there's no way you can make this all a race to the bottom, like that. But I don't believe that. I think there is. We're rather small, but have a lot of impact. We attract a lot of sponsors because they want to be affiliated with quality. I think our bet is quality and premium wins out. That's, you know, other people, BuzzFeed is a whole different thing. They're mass. But, you know, it's just a question of what, again, you have to super define yourself. I think Grantland wasn't, I don't think ESPN was backing it the way they weren't selling it the way it should have been sold. Maybe he's better off in a smaller environment. He'll probably do just as well and probably be more successful. It just won't be enormous. And I think the problem is a lot of these companies need enormous successes, not little ones, a bunch of little ones.
do you think we'll see more splintering then? If there
Yeah,
are,
I think
okay.
people will keep trying it. I just think it's not, you know, they'll try podcasts now. Everyone's sort of rushing into that space. The money will dry up in that one also. And we'll see where it goes. But I think you'll see a ton of experimentation. That's always a good thing, I think. It's just not going to be these massive media companies. You know, their ratings are declining. Like, they just are. There's just no way around it. And people, you know, again, anyone under, if you have children, you see how they consume. I consume differently too. I don't watch linear television. I haven't done it in years. I watch on demand, or I buy it, or whatever. I don't steal. I'm not allowed to. I think it's wrong too. Be careful.
Sorry.
Hi, I have a good question over here. So I feel like with social media in particular, as publishers, like we're still operating as though we're publishers, but when it comes to social media, we're really advertisers.
Yeah.
And we're advertisers who want people to click back on our thing so we can sell advertising, and those people are usually some random weird site that's advertising more things that they want you to click on. So it's almost like a pyramid scheme or a rabbit hole of some kind that it's turned into. Is there a way, do you think, or do you have insight on breaking that cycle, or is there a way to exist and have presence, you know, outside of these now or in the future, these social media platforms which kind of dictate everything?
I think it's super difficult. I was at a dinner with this head of an ad agency, a very prominent person. I said his name, you'd know him. And he said, I'll advertise on your site just once, and then I'll see where they go. I'll put an ad tracker, follow them. And then they'll go to a cheaper site, and I'll buy that site. Like, and I was like, that's genius, you asshole. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but he's right. So I think it's really hard to know how you attract. I think the homepage is dead. I mean, let's be clear. Like, nobody goes to the homepage. I mean, we understood that. Talk about data informed. I paid a lot of attention to that. You know, journalists focus on the front page. Front page. There is no front page. That's not how people come to things. They come in on the side. They come in the top. And a lot of journalists continue to be like the holy church of the front page kind of thing. And That's not, I think what's interesting is they consume things in a certain way, and then they make things that people don't consume in a certain, that they wouldn't even consume that way. I think some sites are more successful than others just because we're used to them, like the New York Times app and stuff like that's very front pagey kind of thing. But I'm just used to that, so that's why it works. But I do think it's there is a point where we're going to have to work in conjunction with these social media sites to get our content out there. It's a question of where it's going to live. I think probably on Facebook, on Google. I don't think there's any way to avoid that. And then the question is, how do you monetize it together? Because eventually they do need it to be good for people to be participating in it. But my message is they don't care what it is. If you think they do, they don't. You know, LinkedIn talks about it a lot, like, oh, we care about the content, and they're the friendliest, but I don't think they do. You know, I'm sort of just show me the money kind of person. But
Ralph.
another Tom Cruise movie. All right, I like him.
So,
Not really. Not even slightly.
so I actually read your 2 AOL books,
Oh, God.
and I was there.
Ah,
And people talk about Facebook and Google today in the way that folks used to talk
yeah.
about AOL in
Sure.
98 and 99.
Mm-hmm.
Fast forward 15 years,
Absolutely.
different situation.
I fully expect them to be dead, yes.
Yeah, and that's my question.
Yeah.
This is the cycle of life in this business.
Well, except,
but what's the difference? Are they going to avoid it by not acquiring Time Warner or something like
well,
that?
that was a bad move, as we all
Yes.
can agree now. I think that actually wasn't a bad idea. It just was a bad execution of a pretty good, interesting idea, especially around cable. That was a really interesting idea. And that was just, there had to be some holy war between old and new media, and it had to be played out at some point. I think that I think you're right. They could just go the way of all these companies do, and that's going to, like, we're all going to die, let's face it, like, kind of thing. And, but I do think Facebook is really interesting in its trying to innovate and move forward. I think AOL just sat there and things changed and they didn't change. They just didn't. They thought they were on top and they didn't think they had any incursions. And they had all the pieces. If you look at a lot of the chat was in there, a lot of stuff that's now, same thing, there's a company called General Magic that essentially was the iPhone. It was. It just didn't execute correctly. So a company, Google's desperately trying to innovate and try to find something beyond search. They're trying everything. The only thing they need to do is create a time machine and just go back and continue to steal ideas. I don't know what else they could do, but they have a harder time because search paradigm is very much it's in an ending zone for sure. I think you don't Google search as much as you used to. You just don't. It'll go on for a while. I think Facebook is really interesting with its purchases. I think its purchase of WhatsApp was ignored, and I think it was a great idea. Communications and putting all kinds of stuff in there. I think the Oculus thing is. I have a lot of interest in VR. I didn't think I would, but once you start using it, it's really compelling. It's a really compelling thing. And so I think the question is if Facebook runs those platforms, they have the best platform. The VR platform that's best is that if they can continue to innovate or buy their way into innovation, I think they have a chance. He's that guy is, he started off kind of like the movie, kind of a douche, but he's really smart. It's really hard to not know that this guy's really smart about the future. And so, or he thinks really hard about it and is really clever and hires incredibly clever people. So I think a company like Facebook they have managed to jump several possible issues and they're still so relevant right now. And I just think the question is, how do they stay relevant with other products that aren't necessarily its core product and make them profitable? But yeah, it could easily happen. But a lot of AOL's issues, as you must know if you had been there, was self-inflicted. Like, there wasn't a toe they didn't shoot off. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you just watch them. It's sort of like Yahoo right now. It's like, oh, you missed one. Oh, no, you didn't. You know what I mean? Like, they just literally, you watch, it's like watching someone fall down, willfully throw themselves down the stairs. And you're like, I'd like to help you, but what an idiot you are. Like, they literally make every mistake. They just keep doing it. And you're like, I don't know. Anyway, I think a lot of things are usually self-inflicted. So.
Great. I think we're about out of time, but if I could just get, I don't want to let you off the stage without asking you one question. You alluded to it with the Bill Gates comment earlier. The Apple and FBI, you started out as a legal battle, now it seems a PR battle. What's your take on it, having such a view into Silicon Valley and the media world?
It has to be a PR battle, 'cause it's a legal battle. I mean, everything is PR now, isn't it? It's really kind of depressing. I think that, you know, my inclination is to be pro-Apple because the extent of government spying is really quite, you never thought the government was that smart, did you? Until the Snowden things, you're like, ooh, they're actually good at some things. But I think I admire Tim Cook for standing up. I don't think they're trying to sell more iPhones. I think that's bullshit on the part of the FBI. It's just bullshit. Although this FBI director is sort of terrific and he's not given up. You know what I mean? He's kind of fantastic in that way. I do think that they're lying when they say they only want it for this one phone. It's just a lie. It's just 100% a lie. They want it for all the phones. They want all these abilities to do. They want every ability to do everything because they are flummoxed by this new situation, you know, where people are using these things. That said, a lot of these terrorists are just using texting. It's not like, you know, there's these secret special devices that people are using that they're. And the other thing is, just why don't you do some regular police work? Or maybe we shouldn't be invading all these Arab countries. It's causing these problems. It's so complicated, and it's down to an iPhone. Like, really? The iPhone's the reason we're facing ISIS? Like, stop. Like, please stop right now. Like, it's not the case. They should be doing other things. They should be, there's so many other things that are part of this. That said, you know, it's an issue if there's, you know, they appeal to the emotions. Like, I was on something with this guy, Joe Miller, anyway, he goes on about, like, if it was an Apple executive's child, they would give it over. I'm like, no, they wouldn't. Like, that's such a ridiculous argument. Like, of course we'd give it up. We'd try to give up with our kids, but that's really not the point here. Is it that people should, the issues between privacy and between what the government needs is important and complicated debate. That said, so you can't reduce it. It's so reductive right now that it's ridiculous. It's like, it's so important to be worried about government intrusion. It's really important to have a key that everybody could open up all iPhones. And it's also important to be the fact that these are real threats. The world is a scary place, and whatever we can do to help prevent it is a good thing. But it seems to me every time in history where the government overreaches, they're really there's just not they've never not overreached. And that's what they're trying to do here. And if I was the government, that's what I'd do. You know, why wouldn't you overreach? And I think that it's really risky on Apple's part to do this. I think it is difficult for their investors, you know, on all kinds of issues. It's difficult for their investors. I think they are not doing it out of PR. It's just, it's just not true. He really believes this. And I think you know, and Silicon Valley is full of privacy advocates that really think that people should have their information protected. And they're battling against people that said, well, I don't want to bomb things, so open it up for everybody. Like, I have nothing to hide. Well, you do have things to hide. Like, everybody has secrets that they don't want out there. And if you want the ability for the government to get to anything, and by nature the government can't help itself. It's like you know, it just has to grab more. It's about on the other hand, the fact that Google and Facebook, now Apple does not collect a lot of personal information. That's the other thing, is Apple's not one of those companies that is doing a lot of collecting of personal information. It just isn't. It's selling those devices. They don't traffic in that. Do you want Google to have, like, Google has an enormous amount of information about you. Facebook has an enormous amount of information about you. Do you trust the company more or the government more? Presumably we should probably trust the government more, right? Because we elected these people, right? Presumably. And so that's the question is, do you trust Google? Do you trust, because they do have an enormous power. And that does worry me on a lot of levels, because they're completely unchecked. And one of the Google executives, because I always call them the Borg, and they're trying to kill the human race. I just always do that as a joke, because I like to poke at them. But it's a real worry I have. And they said, we're good people, Kara. Why do you always say, you know, be evil? I make a joke on their don't be evil thing. And I said, because you may be nice, but who's the next person that's running Google? I don't know who it is. Like, what if an evil person really gets a hold of all this information? Like, you know what our history is littered with examples of governments and companies getting control of information and abusing it. They just can't help themselves. And so if there's no checks and people don't understand it on both sides, everybody else suffers. And I just think we should distrust the government, we should distrust these companies, and not distrust, you should have a wariness of all of their motives. And I think that's what's getting lost, obviously I clearly don't like Donald Trump, but like he says stupid shit. Like it's like a reality show. It's like it's not. It's like this is real life, and I think people have to really think hard because they're going to get the country they deserve if they don't stick up for it. And so in that way, I am proud of. I suspect they will lose. I think most people, but I'm glad they fought it. I'm glad they fought it, and they should. That's what our country's about, in its best. So.
Well, that's great. Well, a very insightful answer to a complicated question. Yeah. And regrettably, we're out of time. I think we're over time. So thank you so much for joining us today. Please join me in thanking